The rain was thin, but relentless, like the sky itself was mourning with me. I held my umbrella in one hand and a handkerchief in the other, yet the wind kept tearing both away, as if grief wanted no shelter. Burying my mother felt unreal. The world seemed to pause, listening to the thud of soil against her coffin. I never knew cold could come from the inside. When everyone else left, I stayed. I couldn't walk away from that fresh stone, her name carved into silence. Helena Duarte, 1934 to 2023. That's when I saw it, a small iron box resting on the edge of the grave, wet and half-buried, as if someone had placed it there for me. None of the gravediggers noticed. I knelt down, my pulse quickening. The box was damp, heavier than it looked, sealed with a bronze lock darkened by time. Underneath it, a note, smeared by the rain. The handwriting, I knew it instantly. My mother's, it said. For when I am no longer here. A chill spread through me. Maybe it was some sentimental memento, a forgotten trinket. But something deep inside whispered that it wasn't. The cemetery was empty now, only the echo of thunder answering my unease. I slipped the box into my bag and hurried to my car. As I started the engine, I glanced at the mirror and froze. A shadow stood beside the grave. Thin, still, watching. It vanished when I blinked. I drove home in silence, but halfway there, the radio turned on by itself. A song began to play, the one my mother always played while making coffee in the morning. I turned the knob, but the volume grew louder instead, distorted, as if the voice came from beneath water. The air turned cold, unnaturally cold. My fingers trembled as I gripped the wheel. I almost pulled over. When I finally reached home, I sat in the car for a while, heart pounding. The box lay on the passenger seat, and it felt alive. I couldn't leave it there. I brought it inside, still wet from the cemetery. The moment I entered, the smell of my mother's perfume filled the room, that old rose scent she wore every Sunday. It shouldn't have been there, but it was thick in the air. I set the box on the table and stared at it for what felt like hours. Somehow, I knew she had left me something I wasn't supposed to find. That night, just as I began to drift to sleep, a faint metallic sound echoed from the living room, a creak, like a lock snapping open. My chest tightened. I got up, walked toward the noise, and froze at the sight. The box was open. Inside lay a golden key, tied with a thin red ribbon. As I picked it up, a gust of cold air swept through the house, though every window was shut. And then a whisper, soft, unmistakable, saying my name. That was the night her funeral truly began. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that whisper, soft, distant, but calling my name with the same tone my mother used when I was a child. I kept telling myself it was grief, that my mind was playing cruel tricks. But deep down, I knew the sound didn't come from memory. It came from somewhere inside the house. At dawn, I walked to the living room. The box was still there, the golden key gleaming faintly under the pale light. I picked it up again. It was colder than before, as if it had spent the night in ice. When I held it tightly, I felt a pulse, not mine, but something rhythmic, steady, like the heartbeat of another person trapped in metal. I placed the key on the table and stepped back. The air felt heavier. For a moment, I thought I saw movement by the window, a shape passing behind the curtain. But when I looked, nothing. Only the reflection of my own tired face. Still, I could swear I smelled her perfume again. As I walked through the hallway, memories began to bleed into the present. The old grandfather clock ticked slower than usual, and each sound felt like it was syncing with my pulse. I remember my mother standing there, dusting the shelves, humming that same song from the radio. And suddenly, the hum returned, faint, distant, but unmistakable. I followed the sound to her bedroom. Everything was exactly as she'd left it. The bed made, the framed photographs perfectly aligned, the air still carrying that faint scent of lavender. But something was off. The mirror on her vanity had a thin crack running down the center, a crack that hadn't been there before. I leaned closer, and my reflection flickered for just a second. Not enough to understand what I saw, but enough to make me stumble back. My breathing quickened. That's when I realized I was still holding the key in my hand. I whispered to myself, "What do you open?" And my voice trembled. The key felt heavier, almost defiant. Then, from somewhere behind the wall, came a soft knock.
1, 2,
3 times. Like an answer. I froze. The sound was coming from inside the wall, near the wardrobe. I pressed my ear against it. Silence. But when I stepped back, I noticed the faint outline of something strange behind the wallpaper. A square shape uneven, like a hidden door. The whisper came again, closer this time, almost touching my ear. "Find me." I dropped the key in shock, and it hit the floor with a metallic echo that seemed to last forever. When I looked down, it wasn't where it should have fallen. It had slid all the way to the base of the wall, right where the hidden shape was. I stared at that patch of wallpaper for what felt like hours. The faint outline of a door was almost invisible, yet I couldn't unsee it once I'd noticed. My hands trembled as I reached for the edge of the wall, tracing the seam beneath the floral pattern my mother had loved so much. It felt wrong to tear it, like desecrating her memory, but the whisper hadn't left my mind. "Find me." I went to the kitchen and grabbed a small knife. The blade quivered as I peeled away the first strip of paper. Beneath it, old wood appeared, dark and dry, smelling faintly of earth and iron. The deeper I cut, the more the house seemed to breathe. The wooden beams creaked, the floorboards moaned. It was as if the walls themselves were resisting me. By the time I revealed the full outline, my hands were shaking uncontrollably. The shape was unmistakable, a small wooden door, about shoulder height, with a circular lock, the exact size of the key. My heart skipped a beat. I wanted to stop. Every instinct screamed that this was a line I shouldn't cross. But grief, curiosity, and something darker pushed me forward. I took the golden key from the table. It shimmered faintly in the dim light, as if aware of what was about to happen. I knelt down, inserted it into the keyhole, and froze. The metal was warm. Not from my hand, from the inside. The first turn came with a low groan, a sound that vibrated through the floorboards. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the air turned heavy, thick with the scent of old wood and something sweet, almost metallic. I turned the key again, and the lock clicked open with a sound that didn't belong to this century. For a long moment, I couldn't move. My breath came in short gasps, the silence pressing against my ears. Then, with a trembling hand, I pulled the door open. The hinges whined like something waking up after a long sleep. Behind it, darkness. Not the kind you get from absence of light. This one felt dense, as though it had weight. The air inside was colder, and I swear it carried a faint whisper, the same one from before, only now more urgent, closer. I lit a candle and leaned forward. The passage was narrow, almost like a crawl space, leading into the wall. Cobwebs, dust, and faint carvings along the wood, symbols I didn't recognize. One of them resembled an eye, scratched so deeply it seemed to bleed shadow. My hand trembled as I whispered, "Mother, what did you do?" The flame flickered violently, as if the air had shifted. Then, just as I was about to step back, something moved inside the dark. A rustle, soft, but real. I dropped the candle. The light went out. In the pitch black, I heard it again. My mother's voice, faint, echoing through the hidden space. "Don't come any closer." I stood frozen in that darkness, my back pressed against the cold wood. The whisper still echoed through the passage, fading and returning like waves against a shore. "Don't come any closer." My breath fogged in the air, visible even in the black. It was her voice, the tone, the rhythm, but something in it felt hollow, distant, as though it came from a throat that no longer breathed. When I finally dared to move, I reached for the candle I dropped. My fingers brushed the wax, still warm. I lit it again, and the flame revealed something new. Inside the narrow passage, the wooden beams were covered with marks, hundreds of thin scratches, as if someone had clawed at the walls from within. My stomach twisted. They weren't random. They formed words. I leaned closer, holding the candle up. The carvings spelled out a single phrase, repeated over and over in my mother's handwriting. Keep it closed. My pulse quickened. The whisper came again, softer this time. You shouldn't be here. I stumbled backward, my shoulder hitting the vanity. The candle wavered, but I held it tight. The air behind me felt alive, like someone was standing too close, watching, breathing. I turned quickly. Nothing. Only the cracked mirror, reflecting my fear back at me. Trying to steady myself, I shut the small door and locked it with the key again. The instant the metal clicked, the whisper stopped. Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. It was as if the whole house exhaled. I collapsed onto the floor, the key still clutched in my hand. My heart pounded against my ribs, but the room felt calmer, almost relieved. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined everything. But when I looked at the key again, there was something new, a faint smear of dark red along the ribbon. I touched it. Sticky.
Fresh.
I froze, unable to breathe. The house creaked again, this time from the ceiling, a long groaning sound like footsteps above me. Slow. Deliberate. I whispered her name. Mother? No reply. Only the faint ticking of the grandfather clock from the hallway, though it had stopped working years ago. Something had awakened in that house the moment I turned the key. And deep down, I began to understand. She hadn't been trying to hide something from me. She'd been trying to protect me from whatever was locked inside. The sound came again, slow, deliberate, unmistakably human. Footsteps above me, pacing the ceiling. I hadn't been in the attic for years, not since my mother had forbidden me to enter it as a child. I stood in the hallway, listening. The steps moved from one end of the house to the other, then stopped right above where I stood. For a moment, silence. Then one last creak, as if someone had leaned down to listen back. My skin prickled. I whispered into the stillness. Who's there? No answer. Only that oppressive quiet that made my heartbeat sound too loud. I told myself it must be the wind, or rats, or the old beams settling. Yet as I climbed the stairs, the air grew heavier, thicker. The smell of dust mixed with something faintly sweet, the same metallic scent that had filled the hidden passage. Halfway up, the lights flickered. I almost turned back. When I reached the attic door, the doorknob was warm. My hand hesitated before gripping it. The metal felt alive, pulsing faintly beneath my palm. I turned it slowly, the hinges groaning in protest. The door opened to reveal darkness and a faint shimmer of moonlight seeping through the window's cracks. Everything was just as I remembered. Old trunks, faded curtains, stacks of boxes. But one thing stood out. In the far corner, a rocking chair moved gently, as if someone had just left it. My chest tightened. The chair had belonged to my mother. She used to sit there for hours, knitting in silence. I took a step forward, the floorboards sighing beneath my feet. Mother, I whispered. The rocking slowed, then stopped. The silence that followed was unnatural, stretched thin, waiting. I reached for one of the trunks, lifting its lid with trembling fingers. Inside, carefully folded linens and a photograph on top. It was me, as a child, standing beside the same rocking chair. But behind me, in the photograph, was a shadow, a tall, indistinct figure leaning close. The same shape I'd seen by the grave. My breath hitched. I dropped the photo, and it slid beneath the chair. As I bent to pick it up, I saw something else glinting beneath the floorboards, another key, identical to the first, tied with a darker ribbon. The smell of iron filled the air. Then, from above, near the rafters, came a low whisper. Not words this time, but a breath. A presence. I straightened slowly. The chair began to move again, creaking in a slow, steady rhythm. This time, no wind could explain it. And from behind the chair, two faint outlines began to form, like hands pressing through the air itself. The second key lay half-buried beneath the rocking chair, its ribbon darker than dried blood. For a long moment, I simply stared at it, unable to move. The air around me was still, but I could feel something shifting, like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what I would do. Against every instinct, I reached down and picked it up. It was heavier than the first, colder too, and when my fingers brushed the ribbon, a wave of dizziness swept through me. Images flashed behind my eyes, my mother, sitting in that same chair, whispering to someone I couldn't see. Her lips moved, her hands shaking as if in prayer. Then the image was gone, leaving only the echo of her voice. One key opens. The other binds. I stumbled backward, clutching the key. The rocking chair had stopped moving. The silence was unbearable now, pressing into my ears until I could hear my own pulse. I looked around the attic, and something strange caught my eye, the old mirror leaning against the wall. It was covered in a thin sheet of dust, but beneath it, faint marks traced along the frame. Letters. Words. I wiped the dust away, revealing the message carved into the wood. Use only one. My chest tightened.
My mother had written that.
I could tell by the uneven scrawl, the way she looped her letters. But why would she leave two keys, one golden, one dark, and tell me to use only one? A sudden thud behind me made me spin around. One of the old trunks had fallen open, scattering its contents, yellowed papers, photographs, an old rosary tangled in cobwebs. On top of them lay a diary, bound in cracked leather. My mother's handwriting covered the first page. The door must remain closed. The second key must never be turned. My throat went dry. I felt watched, though the attic was empty. The shadows stretched longer, darker, moving even as the candle flames stood still. I turned to leave, but the door had shut itself. I rushed forward, twisting the knob, locked. From the other side came a faint scratching, rhythmic and slow, as if something dragged its nails across the wood. I pounded on the door. Stop it, please. The sound paused. Then a whisper, soft, almost tender. Use the key. I froze. The golden key from the hidden door burned faintly in my pocket, while the new one pulsed cold in my palm. Two choices. One promise. My mother had tried to warn me, but the house, it seemed, wanted something else. When I finally forced the attic door open, it didn't feel like escape. It felt like release. The air that spilled out was thick and heavy, as though something had been holding its breath inside that room. I stumbled down the stairs, both keys clenched in my fists, one burning hot, the other freezing cold. The whole house groaned, the floorboards stretching like old bones waking up. By the time I reached the hallway, the golden key had dimmed completely, its shine gone. I placed both on the table, side by side. They looked like reflections of each other, same design, same size, only reversed in tone. Light and shadow. My mother's warning echoed again. Use only one. I didn't know if she meant to protect me or the thing behind that door. I took a deep breath and walked back to her bedroom. The wallpaper around the hidden door was torn and curling at the edges. The small lock gleamed faintly in the candlelight. I tried the golden key first, the one I'd found in the box by her grave. It slid in easily, but when I turned it, it refused to move. Something inside resisted, grinding against the metal as though the mechanism itself were alive. I pulled it out and stood there, heart pounding. The whisper came again, soft and close. Wrong one. The candle flickered violently, casting shadows that twisted across the walls like long, reaching fingers. My hand shook as I lifted the second key, the dark one from the attic. The moment I brought it near the lock, the air temperature dropped. My breath came out as fog. The key slid in effortlessly, as though the lock had been waiting for it all along. I hesitated. My reflection in the cracked mirror beside me seemed to move on its own, a half smile, not mine. I turned the key. A deep, hollow sound echoed through the house. A sigh, or maybe a moan, followed by the faint vibration of wood expanding. The small door creaked open, just an inch. Cold air poured out, carrying with it the scent of damp soil and something faintly sweet, like decaying flowers. "Mother?" I whispered. No reply. The silence after that was alive, tense, watching, listening. I knelt, pushing the door open wider. The space beyond wasn't the same as before. The passage had changed. It was deeper now, darker, the walls pulsing slightly, like the inside of something breathing. The candlelight trembled as I leaned forward. From somewhere deep inside the tunnel, something shifted, slow, deliberate. Then I heard it again, my name. Not whispered this time, but spoken, in my mother's exact voice. The way it said my name froze me. Not just the sound of it, but the weight behind it. My mother's voice had always carried warmth, even in anger. This one didn't. It was flat, hollow, as if echoing from inside my own chest. I wanted to believe it was memory, grief, or fatigue, but deep down I knew something in that space was speaking through her voice. I crouched in front of the small door, the dark key still trembling in the lock. The tunnel beyond looked deeper now, impossibly so. The candlelight barely touched the edges. I whispered, "Who's there?" Silence. Then a low murmur, like someone breathing just beyond the reach of the light. My hands shook as I picked up the candle and leaned in. The air was thick and damp, and my reflection in the brass holder looked distorted, stretched. "Mother," I whispered again, almost pleading. The reply came instantly. "You opened it." I dropped the candle. The flame sputtered and died, leaving only the faint glow from the keyhole behind me. I scrambled backward, heart racing, but the door didn't close. Instead, the air grew colder, pulling me forward, like the tunnel itself was inhaling. From within came a soft scraping sound, slow, steady, deliberate, as if nails were dragging across wood. Then, faintly, laughter. My mother's laughter, but twisted, fragmented, cut short by something that wasn't hers. I slammed the small door shut and twisted the key. Nothing. It wouldn't lock. I pulled and pushed, but it was stuck half open, the darkness pulsing faintly with each beat of my heart. I stumbled to my feet and backed away, gasping for breath. The smell of iron filled the room again, that sweet, metallic tang that seemed to seep from the walls. For a few minutes, I just stood there, frozen. Then, from behind the closed mirror, I heard it again, a whisper, almost kind this time. "You shouldn't have listened to her." My stomach turned. I looked around, desperate, and realized the room wasn't as it had been. The photographs on the wall, my childhood, my mother, our family had changed. Faces blurred, expressions twisted. In one of them, my reflection was missing entirely. My knees weakened. The whisper came one last time, calm, almost soothing. "Come closer."
You don't need the light.
The candle at my feet reignited on its own, but the flame burned black. And then, for the first time, I saw a shape move inside the tunnel, something small, crawling, dragging itself toward me. The sound it made wasn't human. It was soft, deliberate, like wet fabric being dragged across the floor. I couldn't move. I could only watch as the darkness within the tunnel rippled, taking shape, piece by piece. Something pale emerged first, a hand, thin and trembling, its skin gray and translucent, veins like spiderwebs beneath the surface. My stomach turned as I saw what dangled from its wrist, my mother's gold bracelet. I whispered her name, not because I believed it was her, but because I didn't know what else to do. The figure froze. Then, with a slow, unnatural movement, it tilted its head forward, revealing the faint outline of a face. It was her face, and yet not. The features were familiar, but wrong, stretched, twisted, as if someone had tried to remember her and failed. "Mother," I whispered again, tears stinging my eyes. The thing smiled, though the motion cracked its skin, releasing a faint hiss like steam. "You opened the wrong door," it said in her voice, but the tone was off, fragmented, overlapping, like two voices speaking at once. I stepped back, but the air behind me was solid, as though the room itself had shifted closer. It crawled further out, dragging its legs behind it. Each movement left a dark, wet streak on the floorboards. Its hands clutched the frame of the secret door, leaving prints that smoldered faintly in the candlelight. The black flame trembled but didn't go out. It just bent toward the creature, as if drawn to it. I tried to run, but my legs refused to move. The room had gone impossibly cold. Frost gathered on the mirror and along the edges of the doorframe. "You weren't supposed to see," it whispered. She promised. The words made no sense, yet they hit something deep inside me. A memory I couldn't fully grasp, something my mother had once said when I was a child. I fell to my knees. "What are you?" The thing tilted its head, the smile widening, the sound of bone creaking beneath skin. "I'm what she hid," it said softly, "and what you set free." It began to stand, slowly, its body stretching taller than it should have been. The bracelet on its wrist clinked with each movement, the sound painfully familiar. I backed into the wall, gasping, searching for something, anything, to fight back. My hands brushed against the two keys on the floor. Both were glowing now, one gold, one black, pulsing in opposite rhythms, like two hearts beating against each other. The creature's eyes, empty and white, fixed on them. It took a step toward me, the floor groaning beneath its weight, and whispered, "Only one of us leaves this house." Both keys pulsed in my trembling hands, one radiating heat like a heartbeat, the other cold as the grave. Their glow lit the room in flickers of gold and shadow, casting the creature's face into alternating halves, one eerily human, the other pure void. It watched me, silent now, as though waiting for me to understand what it already knew. "You opened what she sealed," it said, its voice no longer trying to imitate my mother. "Now you must finish it." Its gaze dropped to the keys. One for her, one for me. I could barely breathe. My mother's words echoed in my head. "One key opens, the other binds," but she never said which was which. The golden key throbbed with a warmth that felt almost alive, familiar, comforting, yet there was something deceptive in that comfort. The black key hummed faintly, its coldness spreading through my fingers, numbing my skin. They were both calling to me, pulling at my mind in opposite directions. Behind me, the mirror began to rattle, faint cracks spreading outward like veins. In its reflection, the creature stood closer than it truly was, its hand nearly touching my shoulder. "Choose," it hissed, "or I will." My heart pounded so violently that I feared it might stop. The walls around me seemed to lean inward, the air vibrating with low, pulsing sound. I raised the golden key. The creature recoiled slightly, its body twitching, the smile faltering. A flash of hope struck me, but then the warmth in my hand turned to searing pain. The key burned, branding my skin. I dropped it, and the glow vanished. The thing laughed, not loud, but deep, rolling, like something laughing through her voice. Desperate, I turned to the dark key. It no longer felt cold. It pulsed steadily, rhythmically, matching the sound of my heartbeat. My mother's voice whispered inside my head, faint but pleading, "Don't use it." Yet beneath her words, another voice, softer, calmer, murmured, "You have no choice." I took one step toward the secret door, both voices screaming inside my skull. The creature backed away, eyes wide, trembling as though afraid for the first time. I lifted the black key and pressed it against the lock. The wood hissed where it touched. "I'm sorry," I whispered. I wasn't sure to whom I was speaking. The moment I turned the key, the ground shook violently. The door slammed shut on its own, trapping the darkness inside, or perhaps trapping me outside. A deep roar filled the house, then silence. When I looked around, the creature was gone. The candle extinguished itself. In the dark, the only thing left glowing faintly on the floor was the golden key, cracked down the middle, still warm. When I opened my eyes, sunlight poured weakly through the curtains, pale, uncertain, as if afraid to touch the walls. For a moment, I thought it had all been a dream. The small door was closed. The floorboards were still. The air smelled of dust and nothing else. But as I stood, the silence felt too complete, too forced, like a held breath waiting to be released. The golden key lay near my feet, cracked down the center. I reached for it, but it crumbled to ash the moment I touched it. My heart jumped. Beneath the soot, something shimmered, a faint trace of light that pulsed once, then vanished. I looked toward the mirror, half expecting to see her standing behind me, but it only reflected the room. For the first time in days, the house was quiet. No whispers, no footsteps, no cold drafts. Yet it wasn't peace, it was stillness, the kind that follows after something ancient exhales. The boards creaked softly under my steps, and the faint scent of roses drifted by. My mother's perfume. Again. I wandered through the rooms, running my fingers along the walls. The texture felt wrong, smoother than before, warmer. In the hallway, the old grandfather clock was ticking again, slow and steady. It hadn't worked in years. The hands pointed to 12, unmoving, yet the sound continued.
Tick, tick, tick.
When I passed the mirror in the corridor, I almost didn't look. But something drew my eyes. At first, it showed only me, older, worn, hollow-eyed. Then, slowly, the reflection blinked, and I didn't. My breath caught. The reflection's lips curved into a faint, familiar smile. My mother's smile. I stumbled back, nearly falling. The image in the mirror tilted its head, the same way she used to when she disapproved of something. Behind her reflection, I could see movement, shadows sliding across the wallpaper, slow as smoke. My hands trembled. The room behind me was empty, but the mirror showed otherwise. The whisper came again, faint but clear, carried by the ticking of the clock. You did well. My knees weakened. Mother? I whispered. No answer. Only my reflection, now perfectly still, except for the eyes. They were no longer mine. I turned away, heart pounding, but the floor beneath my feet pulsed softly, like something alive. Somewhere deep inside the walls, a long sigh echoed, a breath drawn in. The house had awakened again. And this time it was breathing with me. I avoided the mirror for most of that morning, moving through the house as quietly as I could, pretending it wasn't there. But every time I passed the hallway, I felt its pull, that cold awareness crawling along my spine, urging me to look. By afternoon, I gave in. The air had grown heavy again, and curiosity, or perhaps dread, guided me back to it. At first, it showed nothing unusual. My reflection stared back, pale and tired, eyes ringed with sleeplessness. I exhaled in relief, until my reflection didn't. It stood perfectly still, its chest unmoving, while I watched my own breath fog the glass. Then, slowly, it raised its hand. I hadn't moved. My throat closed. The reflection pointed toward the corridor behind me. I turned, heart pounding. The hallway was empty. Dust motes floated lazily in the sunlight. But when I looked back, the mirror showed movement, a shadow gliding toward me, smooth and silent. I spun again. Nothing. The house was still. Yet in the mirror, the shadow had stopped right behind me. My reflection's lips began to move. No sound came out, but I could read them clearly. Don't turn around. My hands trembled. I forced myself to breathe, whispering, What do you want from me? The reflection's expression changed, pity, sorrow, maybe warning. And then, for a fraction of a second, the mirror flickered and showed another scene entirely. It wasn't the hallway anymore. It was the attic, the rocking chair, the cracked diary on the floor, the dark key glinting faintly in the candlelight. But there was something new in the image, a figure sitting in the chair. A woman. She was humming the same lullaby my mother used to sing. The image snapped back to my reflection. My heart raced, cold sweat running down my back. I whispered, Is she still here? The reflection smiled faintly and nodded once. Then the glass darkened, as if filled with smoke, and words began to form in the condensation that spread across its surface. Not here. Not yet. The lights flickered. The smell of roses thickened until it turned almost sickly sweet. The ticking of the clock quickened, matching my heartbeat. I backed away from the mirror, but its surface rippled like water, distorting the reflection into a swirling blur. Just before the glass stilled, I saw something, myself, standing behind me, holding the dark key. I turned around. The hallway was empty. But when I looked down at my hand, the key was there. It was impossible. I had destroyed it. I'd left the dark key locked in that door, buried under everything I swore I'd never touch again. Yet there it was, resting in my trembling palm, heavier than before and faintly pulsing with warmth. The ribbon, once black, now looked deep red, almost wet, as if it had been dipped in blood. I wanted to drop it, but my hand refused to obey. It clung to my skin like it belonged there. The air around me shifted. The house seemed to grow quieter, not the kind of silence that comforts, but the one that listens. Each creak, each whisper of wind outside felt muted, distant. I tried to steady my breathing, but the rhythm of my chest matched the faint pulse from the key. It was synchronizing with me. I stumbled back toward the living room, desperate to escape whatever had returned with it. But as I crossed the hallway, the lights dimmed again, one by one, following me. The smell of roses returned, stronger now, cloying, almost rotten beneath the sweetness. I felt dizzy. The walls seemed to bend slightly, breathing with the same rhythm as the key. I stopped by the table and slammed it down. "What do you want from me?" I screamed. My voice echoed strangely, stretching and fading as though swallowed by the air. Then, faintly, a whisper, not in my ears but inside my head, "Finish it." The words made the key twitch. Its metal softened slightly, bending beneath my fingers like flesh. I gasped and let it fall, but instead of clattering, it landed with a soft, wet sound. When I looked down, it was no longer shaped like a key. The metal had melted into something organic, a small, twisted object pulsing faintly, its surface veined and alive. It writhed once, then stilled. My stomach turned. Whatever it wasn't metal anymore. It was growing. The mirror in the hallway flickered again, showing my reflection standing perfectly still, holding nothing. Yet, behind her, the shadow of the dark key floated midair, glowing softly, suspended like a heartbeat. My reflection smiled faintly, then looked past me, into something I couldn't see. That's when I heard it again. Footsteps upstairs. Slow, dragging, deliberate. They weren't trying to hide this time. The sound moved toward the attic, the same place the second key had been waiting. I picked up the thing on the floor. It pulsed once, then hardened back into metal. My mother's whisper came again, soft but trembling. If it's back, it never left. The stairs groaned beneath my feet as I climbed, each step heavier than the last. The air grew colder, thicker, filled with that same metallic sweetness that clung to the dark key. I hesitated at the top, hand resting on the doorknob. It was warm again, pulsing faintly, like the house itself was aware of my touch. The silence behind the door was total. I turned the handle. The attic was no longer the same. The dust was gone, replaced by an unnatural cleanliness, as though someone had scrubbed away years of neglect in a single night. The trunks stood open and empty, their contents gone. The rocking chair had returned to its place in the center of the room, but this time it was already moving, rocking slowly, rhythmically, as if responding to my heartbeat. I whispered, "Mother?" The chair stopped. For a moment, nothing happened. Then it began to creak again, faster, more erratic, like laughter trapped in wood. The sound rose and fell, accompanied by the faint echo of humming, the lullaby she used to sing to me before bed. My throat tightened. "Please stop." The attic didn't listen. The humming grew louder, but the pitch was wrong. Too deep, too hollow. The rocking chair tipped forward slightly, its legs scraping the floor in short bursts. I took a step closer, and the dark key in my hand began to vibrate violently, pulling me toward the chair like a magnet. That's when I saw it, carved into the floorboards beneath the chair, a symbol. The same eye I'd seen scratched inside the hidden passage. Only now it glowed faintly red, pulsing in sync with the key. My breath came short. I realized, horrified, that the entire attic was rearranging itself, the boards shifting, the walls stretching outward, as though the house was trying to remember its original shape. The smell of roses returned, stronger, almost suffocating now. The mirror in the corner, I hadn't noticed it before, began to ripple again. My reflection stood there, whispering words I couldn't hear. Then, one by one, The boxes around a room started to open by themselves, their lids creaking as if pried from within. I wanted to run, but the floor swelled under my feet, alive, pulsating. From beneath the boards came faint knocks, rhythmic and slow, answering the heartbeat of the house. I fell to my knees, clutching the key to my chest, tears stinging my eyes. "Mother, make it stop," I cried. The humming ceased instantly. The chair stilled. Then a whisper, right beside my ear, though no one stood there. "You came back too soon." The air thickened until breathing felt like swallowing fog. I didn't move. I couldn't. My eyes stayed locked on the rocking chair as a shape began to form upon it, first faint, like smoke caught in the light, then slowly gaining weight, color, presence. A hand appeared, thin and trembling. Then the curve of a shoulder. The silver glint of a wedding ring I knew too well. "Mother?" My voice broke as I whispered it. The shape froze, and for a moment, the attic was utterly silent. Then the figure lifted its head. The face that looked back at me was hers, or almost hers. It carried the softness of her eyes, the slope of her mouth. But it wasn't right. The expression was too still, too deliberate, as if someone were wearing her memory. "You shouldn't have come," she said gently, the same voice that once called me in for dinner, only now it echoed strangely, as if spoken through water. "You woke it." My knees weakened. "Woke what?" I asked. Her head tilted, the faintest smile on her lips. "You think you freed me." The words sliced through me. The dark key in my hand pulsed once, glowing faintly. Her eyes, or what resembled them, flicked toward it. "It's part of me now," she whispered. "Part of us." She reached out her hand, palm open, inviting. "Give it back." I took a step backward. "No," I said, my voice shaking. Her expression darkened, not with anger, but with something worse, disappointment. "You never listened," she said softly, the same tone she used when scolding me as a child. Always opening what should stay closed. The rocking chair began to creak again, slow and rhythmic, but she didn't move. The sound seemed to come from the air itself. I glanced toward the door, but it was gone. The attic walls had shifted again, no longer made of wood, but something darker, smoother, like stone wet with age. My reflection in the mirror behind her was still human, still mine, but the woman in the chair wasn't reflected at all. "Mother," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. "If you're real, if any of this is real, tell me how to stop it." She smiled. It was almost tender. "You can't stop what you've become." The rocking chair stilled. The light dimmed until only her face remained visible, then faded entirely, leaving the chair empty once more. The dark key in my hand burned hot against my skin, as though it had just taken a breath. I found the diary lying where I'd first seen it weeks before, beside the trunk, its cover warped, the leather darker now, as if it had absorbed the air of the attic. The name embossed on it, Helena Duarte, shimmered faintly under the candlelight. My mother's name. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It was warm, almost alive, and the faint scent of roses clung to it like a memory refusing to die. When I opened it, the pages were blank. Every line of handwriting that had once filled its pages was gone. Only faint indentations remained, like ghosts of words pressed into paper. But as I ran my fingers across them, ink began to rise from the impressions, not black this time, but deep red, as though the paper itself was bleeding her thoughts back into existence. The first line appeared slowly. "If you're reading this, it means I failed." My stomach tightened. I flipped the next page, but the diary turned on its own, the corners fluttering as if guided by a breeze I couldn't feel. The next words appeared faster, pulsing faintly in that same red hue. "It isn't death that waits behind the door. It's what I used to stay alive." I froze. A faint creaking sound echoed through the attic, the rocking chair, moving again, though empty. The diary trembled in my hands. The ink shifted, rearranging itself into new sentences as I watched. I fed it my pain, my memories, my voice. It promised me peace, but it wanted more. Tears burned in my eyes. "Mother, what did you do?" The candle flickered violently, throwing shadows across the walls. The words on the page twisted again, forming new lines. I bound it with 2 keys, one to lock it away, one to lock it in me. The air turned cold, sharp, metallic. I could taste the iron in my mouth. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. The final words appeared in a trembling scrawl, uneven, desperate. If the dark key finds you, it means I'm no longer the one wearing my face. The diary snapped shut on its own. I stumbled backward, clutching it to my chest. Behind me, something whispered in my mother's voice, soft and mocking. You read it anyway. The candlelight dimmed until the attic was swallowed in shadow. I tried to run, but my feet wouldn't move. The diary's cover was hot against my palms now, and I felt something shifting beneath the leather, like fingers pressing for me inside, trying to turn the page again. Then, from behind the rocking chair, I heard her voice, low, almost tender. Now you know what I really am. Her voice echoed softly through the attic, layered, doubled. One tone warm and familiar, the other deeper, hollow, like an echo from the bottom of a well. I turned toward the sound, the diary still hot in my hands. What do you mean? I whispered. What are you? The shadows behind the rocking chair shifted, gathering themselves into a shape. The air thickened until it pressed against my skin. The outline of my mother formed again, clearer this time, her eyes glinting like candlelight caught in water. You think I died, she said. But I didn't. I stayed. Her words moved through the air like ripples, and the floor beneath us pulsed once, as if the house itself breathed in her confession. I bound myself here, she continued, to keep it quiet, to keep you safe. My chest tightened. Safe from what? I asked, though I already knew. Her gaze dropped to the dark key still clutched in my hand. From me. The words sank into me like cold water. My breath faltered. No, I whispered, shaking my head. You were trying to stop it. Her face twitched, a flicker of emotion, pain or maybe pity. I was trying to stop becoming it. She stepped closer, and I could smell the faint trace of roses again, sharp and wrong. It needed a vessel. It chose the one who opened the door first. The diary trembled violently, snapping open to a page I hadn't seen before. Words bled across it, written in a hurried scrawl. The house doesn't keep the spirit. The spirit is the house. My vision blurred. The walls around us groaned, stretching and sighing like tired lungs. The mirror behind her rippled again, showing her face and mine, superimposed, fading into each other. You let it breathe again, she said softly. And now it's choosing. The light in the attic flickered, dimmed, and returned, but it was darker now, as though every corner had deepened into something endless. Her voice grew quieter, almost gentle. It needs someone living this time. I took a step back. You can't mean... She raised a trembling hand, her smile almost tender. You're stronger than I was. You'll last longer. The dark key pulsed violently, and the air turned electric. My mother's figure began to flicker, her face splitting between grief and relief. Forgive me, she whispered, but one of us must stay. The diary fell from my hands, pages flaring with red light. The floor beneath my feet shifted again. Breathing in, the house, her, it, all of it, exhaled in a single, deep sound that made the candle flame tremble. And then I understood. My mother hadn't been haunting the house. She was the house. And now it wanted me to join her. I ran for the door, or where the door used to be. The wall was solid now, seamless, like the house had erased the way out. I pounded against it, screaming her name. Mother, let me out. The only reply was the slow groan of wood stretching, sighing, breathing. The floorboards beneath me rippled, softening under my feet. Each step I took sank slightly, like walking on skin. The diary lay open on the floor, its pages turning on their own, faster and faster, words bleeding across them in frantic streaks. It needs a keeper. It always needs a keeper. My heart pounded against my ribs. No, I whispered, shaking my head. Not me. The house answered with a low hum, a sound too deep to be heard, more like a vibration felt inside the bones. The mirror on the far wall shimmered. In it I saw myself, not standing where I was, but sitting in the rocking chair, eyes closed, lips moving silently. The reflection opened its eyes slowly, and I saw her, my mother, smiling from inside my face. I stumbled backward, but the floor tilted, slanting toward the chair. The house was deciding for me. The key pulsed violently in my hand, searing against my palm. I screamed and threw it across the room, but it didn't hit the floor. It floated midair, spinning slowly, its metal glowing between gold and black. The smell of roses thickened again, cloying, suffocating. "You can't run," whispered the voice, my mother's, the house's, both, echoing from everywhere and nowhere. "You are what remains." The ceiling cracked above me, a thin fracture spreading outward like lightning. Dust rained down, fine and soft, glinting in the dim light. Beneath the noise, I could hear a heartbeat, not mine, not hers, but the house's, steady and patient. Every pulse made the key flash brighter. The diary's pages turned to the final line, which etched itself as I watched. "The one who resists stays forever." I dropped to my knees, trembling. My reflection in the mirror leaned forward, whispering something I couldn't hear. Its lips formed words I didn't want to understand. Behind me, the rocking chair began to move again, slow, rhythmic, beckoning. The whisper filled the attic, tender and cruel all at once. "It's already chosen." The walls pulsed once more, closing in, and the candle went out. When the light died, so did the sound. The silence was absolute, not peaceful, but consuming. I couldn't see, but I could feel the house breathing around me, slow and deep. The air pressed against my skin, heavy and damp, each inhale pulling at something inside me. I whispered, barely able to hear my own voice, "Please, I don't want this." The answer came as warmth in my chest, not comfort, but surrender. The key floated closer, glowing faintly between gold and black. I reached for it, not because I wanted to, but because my body moved on its own. My hand closed around the metal, and the moment it touched my skin, every wall in the attic sighed. The heartbeat of the house slowed, syncing with mine. I couldn't tell where I ended and it began. My mother's voice surrounded me again, soft and full of sadness. "It doesn't take you by force," she whispered. "It takes you when you stop fighting." I wanted to shout, to tell her she was wrong, but my lips wouldn't move. My reflection in the mirror smiled faintly, watching with calm eyes that were no longer mine. The rocking chair began to move again, but now the motion was gentle, slow, almost soothing. The sound of its creak matched my breathing. I felt a warmth spreading from the key into my veins, crawling through my body like liquid fire. For a moment, I thought I heard laughter, hers, mine, both blending together until I couldn't tell them apart. The diary on the floor opened one last time. The ink bled upward, filling the final page with words I didn't want to see. To keep it sleeping, one must dream in its walls. My vision blurred. The attic shimmered, its edges fading into darkness. I tried to stand, but my legs refused. The floor felt soft beneath me, rising and falling with my breath. The key dissolved into light, then into nothing. I felt weightless, my heart slowing, my thoughts scattering like dust in the wind. Somewhere in the dark, I heard my mother humming again, the same lullaby she used to sing when I was small. My eyes closed. The house inhaled. When it exhaled, I felt myself move, not my body, but something deeper, sinking into the walls, the floor, the foundation. The hum faded, leaving only the faint ticking of the clock below. The house was calm again. It had its keeper. Years passed. Seasons shifted, leaves fell, snow gathered and melted, and yet the house remained untouched at the edge of the forest. The villagers whispered about it in low tones. The Duarte house, the one no one stayed in for long. They said it was cursed, that the rooms breathed at night, and that sometimes, through the cracks in the shutters, a faint light flickered though the power had been cut decades ago. One autumn evening, A man arrived with a truck full of boxes. He was a historian, they said, or maybe just another fool chasing stories. He stepped out of his car, looked up at the house, and smiled faintly. Finally, he murmured. The front door creaked open on its own, and though he hesitated, curiosity won over caution. He entered, not noticing how the wind outside went suddenly still. The air inside was warm, unnaturally so, carrying the faint scent of roses and something older beneath it. His footsteps echoed softly against the floorboards, which groaned as if waking. Dust floated in the golden light from his flashlight. "Anyone here?" he called out, half joking. The house didn't answer, but somewhere upstairs, a slow creak began, rhythmic, gentle, like a chair moving on its own. He followed the sound, each step heavier than the last. When he reached the attic door, his hand lingered on the knob. It was warm. The smell of roses grew stronger, almost sweet enough to sting. He turned the handle, and the door opened without resistance. Inside, the air shimmered faintly, as though he'd stepped into someone's memory. In the center of the room sat an old rocking chair, moving slowly, though no breeze touched it. On the floor beside it lay a small, blackened diary, its cover cracked and worn. He knelt to pick it up. The first line, still faintly visible, read, "The house doesn't keep the spirit. The spirit is the house." He laughed quietly, shaking his head. "Superstitions," he muttered. But as he turned to leave, the chair stopped rocking. The silence that followed was deep, not empty, but expectant. The air grew colder. The man paused, his breath fogging in front of him. He looked toward the mirror in the corner. It was cracked, its surface cloudy. And yet, faintly, it showed a reflection that wasn't his. An older woman, sitting in the chair, watching him. Her eyes were soft, kind, and full of warning. Before he could move, a whisper brushed his ear, gentle as breath. "You shouldn't have come." The candle on the floor flickered once, though no one had lit it. The diary's pages turned by themselves, the final words glowing faintly before fading back into paper. "The house sleeps again." Downstairs, the old clock began to tick, and the door closed quietly behind him.